Kicking off hour number 2 on a Wednesday with our friend Brian Chrisopherson from Husker 24/7. BC, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing swell. How are you guys?
Do you have BC? Can I just ask you this low hanging fruit question? I'm asking you because I think you do strike me as a guy that's about 96/70 with his systolic and diastolic. Does this Colorado thing feel to you like a rivalry?
Yeah, I think so. I think by definition it is. I probably have I don't know, kind of a loose interpretation of it. Like I would say Iowa is Nebraska's rivalry just because I know fans around here don't like to admit it, but I know it drives people mad when Iowa gets the upper hand in that game. It's like beyond other teams. And I feel it's the same way with Colorado. I don't think it's like obviously it can't be what it was for that. Like it was like an 8-year stretch where it went to another level, right? I mean, where it there was true. I hate using the word hate, which I used twice in that same sentence, but there was that from like 1987ish to 95 or whatever it was. It was rarely to that level, and these guys playing in this game aren't going to know about it. So I guess it depends if you're talking about the fans or the players. So the players, I have to think it's just like, oh yeah, I heard that they used to play in some big games, and I've seen one or two of them on YouTube. So that's all it's got to be probably for the main people are involved in this Saturday. I don't think it means quite what it does to some others.
Well, BC, I mean, you mentioned that stretch there from the late 90s, and I would even stretch it all the way to 2001, right? That's kind of the last the big moment in this series. Those are the thing that is attached to those games was stakes, right? That's where the hatred really came from, in my opinion, right? Is one team was trying to take something from the other team that actually mattered, and we just haven't had that on either side for a really long time.
Yeah. And I think this game though in its own way has something we didn't expect it was going to. I think by Colorado winning the first weekend, it has only heightened how much attention is on that program. And I mean, this is going to be one of the more watched games of this year. I have a feeling.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
yeah.
that's what we're talking about here.
I'm totally with you.
So we can make it like, well, maybe this is a matchup between two teams who only win 6 games at the end of the year. That's very possibly true. And yet that doesn't mean it's not going to be like highly watched. Also a game where I feel like Nebraska has to just view it as an opportunity because it's a chance to jumpstart this thing exactly to get the momentum that was basically the same that they had, I think, at noon on August 31st with the fan base. I think people are really fired up. And then, of course, you lose in heartbreaking fashion, and people have kind of been dealing with that the last few days. But you go and win on this biggest stage with this many people watching against that team with as much attention that has been put on the other side, with people in the national media saying your team's slow and all this stuff. If they were to go out there and play well and get that W, whether Colorado is a good team or not a good team, which we'll see over the course of the season, it's going to have significance. And I'm not here to equate the two, but I want to be very careful with this. But when Bob Devaney first started at Nebraska, like his second week or whatever, he went out to Michigan and they beat Michigan. And it meant a lot at the time, just from the perception of that week. And like they got met at the airport when they came back and got the win and all that stuff. My point of that story is Michigan that year, I think, went like 2-8 or something. So they weren't like a really good football team. And it was at the end of the year, it wasn't like a big win, but nobody cared by the end of it. I'm not saying this is the start of some Devaney run or anything like that. I'm just saying if you could go get a win out there against a ranked team, knock that 21 game streak against ranked teams off the board. You knock down your neighbor a little bit when they're kind of puffing out their chest. and suddenly you're going home to play a few football games. It would be a pretty big deal around here from a perception standpoint. That was my long-winded way to say that.
And you know what, BC, I think you're absolutely right, because all you can control as a player is staying right here, right now. How those two teams end up doesn't really matter, because you know who couldn't care less is all the people beating their chest over Colorado. TCU may be awful. Do you think anybody in Colorado cares? They absolutely don't. Certainly the national media doesn't. So neither one of these teams should have to apologize for anything based on what the other team does. But let me ask you this, BC. It's what about matchups, right? I'm a big fight guy. I love boxing. I love the UFC, and styles make for matchups. And if I watch both teams play, I would have made Colorado probably an 8 or a 9 point favorite. I really would have. They're still less than a key number fave, 2.5. How much of that has to do with the fact you think just stylistically Nebraska can be good where Colorado showed that they maybe weren't, even after only week 1?
I think that's totally what it's about. I think the people who do well at setting these lines understand that CU still has to prove, I think, in a game like this against an opponent far different from them, that they can stand up to a team that is going to, I think they're going to be steady with the run in this game.
I do too.
And, they're going to try to bully Colorado and see if they can stand up to it. And I think people in Vegas or wherever are pretty interested in that too. TCU in many ways was like the perfect kind of first week matchup for them. I don't want to take anything away from that win, because it was they impressed the heck out of me. I didn't expect them to win that game. But I think it was sort of going in. I wasn't stunned that it was just a high flying score-a-thon type of game. And I know TCU returned like 8 guys on the defensive side of the ball too. But I think one thing that could help Nebraska in this game is all the hitting they've done in camp. We've heard all about it. And I thought in the first week, if there's something you really want to hang your hat on as a Husker fan, that was as good a tackling performance as I've seen from Nebraska, like in an opening game in a long time. I just thought they were just solid, and it looked like a team that had spent its August actually doing what they said they were doing with all those live reps and everything, and going beyond thudding even. And so I think that, this is a different animal trying to tackle, I think, some Colorado players in space this week. Maybe. Yeah,
maybe. I listen.
Go ahead.
Maybe. I mean, the collection of the trio of wide receivers and span forward is not anything to sneeze at versus what I think Colorado's bringing out there with Hunter Edwards and Shedeur Sanders, right? Like, I
go ahead.
Nebraska's not dumb. So what I think happens is Hunter will have to exert himself on defense. He's going to have to fit in the run game. They're going to make him have to fit in the run game. And I think conversely, if you can't block Nebraska's guys on the perimeter, did you see like Omar Brown and these guys playing around the line of scrimmage? Like you better be prepared to do that offensively with your skill guys if you even want to remotely run the football.
I'm glad you interjected there, because what my finishing thought was going to be to that was if you like listen to Tony White last night on the radio, he was respectful. So I don't want to make it seem like he
very much so, but he was not in awe.
Yeah, that was the point. Yeah, it was when it got to like a question of, it was sort of based on what we're talking about, tackling Colorado and all that stuff and their speed. And he's like, they're fast. He kind of let it go right there, and that was that. So I think they probably feel like you do. And he loved how that third level played against Minnesota that you're bringing up. For their first game together, Omar Brown and Deshaun Singleton, those guys love to hit. And this is a different type of test a little bit, but I think that's good of you too, to also, let's not act like Minnesota doesn't have some decent athletes on the perimeter.
Crooms, Daniel Jackson Jr., Spanford, those guys will be playing on Sunday. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And the concepts were tough, right? It's not, and I'm not, this is not to be disrespectful to Colorado, but that was not an intricate enough passing offense to be sustainable. I'm going to say it. They may light Nebraska up for 420, but over time, those concepts, you're going to have to do more if you can't run the ball. Because I know what people will play. I don't know why TCU didn't get out of it, right? They kind of stayed with the same thing, but I'm not ready to say it was fool's gold because Shedeur Sanders is a great player. Hunter is a great player. These guys were highly recruited. Dylan Edwards, they're elite. But 2 swing passes go for like $140.
Yeah. Well, and you're probably not going to,
you know what I mean, BC? It's like,
and you may not see a more athletic catch all year than the one we saw Jackson make against Nebraska, right? So when you're comparing athletes,
he's a dude.
You know what I mean?
Jackson is
probably
polished route runner.
You might get equal, but you're not getting anything more athletic than we saw. That was one of the most athletic plays I think I've ever seen.
Just the route running is different. If a guy's just fast,
you can deal
but
with
not
that.
a great route runner,
you can deal with that.
I can deal with that because I can negotiate space.
I think Nebraska fans have also learned firsthand through the last decade. People can say what they want on the outside about the Big Ten, and I think when you're not close to it, there's often sort of misconceptions about it or the lack of speed and all this stuff. Nebraska has played in a bully league. And I think that counts for something too. A lot of these guys have been through tough physical games, and they're going to try to enforce their will in this one. So I don't know if this is a weird thought. I would not predict this like on paper, but in my head, I keep coming back to like one of these teams might just slant this game where it's like a 14-point win their way. Like I could see it being the type of game where either Colorado really is that type of show, and it's something special on Saturday and you're watching it again, or I could see Nebraska coming out and just kind of having their way, controlling the ball, sending the message kind of that you're getting at with their defense and pulling away a little bit. So I think it could, as much as everybody's going to put this as like a 3 to 7 point game, I sort of wonder if one team might take control more when it's all said and done.
BC, as we're having this conversation about speed and about the Big Ten being a bully league and all these, I keep having this flashback to Scott Frost saying, hey, the defenses in the Big Ten are going to have to adjust to us. And they went out and they got all these small, really fast guys. And guess what? Everybody in the Big Ten could keep up. Like, do you think about that at all when you're looking at this matchup? Because that's kind of one of the things that, listen, Sean Lewis probably better at what he does than Scott Frost at least was at Nebraska.
No, I wouldn't say that as a coordinator.
As a coordinator, fair. Okay, so
I think they're on par as coordinators.
Put them on equal playing field as coordinators. Does that kind of come into your head at all? Because I think Colorado's offense last week looked a lot like Scott Frost wanted his offense to look like in the Big Ten, and he could never really get that going. Now, Adrian Martinez maybe isn't Shedeur Sanders, but does that creep into your head at all? Like maybe if you're not good enough on the lines, you're just getting beat up anyway?
It does somewhat. I think another thing I think about is what Tony White said last night. You look fast if you know what you're doing. And Nebraska in the first week on defense, kind of back to what Damon's point is about how I don't think they have to walk in like slouched or anything into this game. I think they can be tall with confidence because they did play fast in the first game. And I know it didn't finish exactly how they wanted. They couldn't make that one final play to get off the field. But if you had put down beforehand, if last week we had said, okay, Nebraska's going to hold Minnesota to 251, they're just going to take away their run game. They're going to have 55 yards and all this, we would have been like, man, that's nice. That in a first,
right? Alec Manis is going to go 24-44 for 195. You guys good with that?
Yeah, I'll take that all day.
I'll take that every day that ends in Y.
Yeah, I mean, it is all about bottom line results, but we're talking right now about Nebraska's defense against that unit, and we can call it strength on strength, but I don't think Nebraska has to walk in thinking they're underweight by 5 to 10 pounds in this fight or something. Like, I think they have some confidence over there from that first game. As Tony White put it last night, some validation. Now you have to back it up, and it is a different test, and the tempo, and you know, I don't know how much Damon thinks of the altitude thing. Nebraska has faltered in some late games there, but I don't know if you would connect that to that or not.
To be fair, they faltered in late games pretty much everywhere.
To BC, did you find it interesting though? Talk about Coach Rule speaking into existence. You caught it's not an altitude thing. It's not a coming off a win, coming off a loss thing. We're going to make this about football.
Mm-hmm.
Like he said that right away. And listen, I'm not saying woo because he says it, therefore it is. I just got the sense that they're prepared to play a certain way because they think they can, not because of the situations that surround him. He wants this to be a physical game. And it's weird, BC, and I'll tell you guys this. Even when I ask him about players, you know, the first thing he talks about is their fitness. Well, such and such is elite level fitness. Such and such, you know, we got to work on. And then he'll get into the attributes. They train in such a way where they don't want time to matter.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? And I
Mm-hmm.
I think he's chomping at the bit to put it on full display on Saturday just to see how fit they are.
Yeah, I can see that. And Tony White said last night, you know, altitude's a thing if you're out of shape, you know. So I don't think they think they're out of shape. You know, if you go back to their offense in Nebraska's offense in week 1, you know, the thing about it is obviously the turnovers you can't have, but Ethan Piper laid it out. You know, he's like, we ran for more than 200 yards if you take away the QB sacks in that game. We being him speaking as the we, not me. 209 yards. And, you know, he said, we haven't done that against Minnesota and since I've been here, basically. So I think even the offensive side of the ball felt like they did a lot of the stuff that was connected to the formula they talked about all off season. So, you know, I don't think they're actually lacking in that confidence too. The question will be, because I think it's always the most important position in sports, you know, is Jeff Sims going to bounce back? And I think he's going to have to make a couple throws in clutch moments, and you're going to have to make that second and goal throw at the 6 maybe this week, and it's got to be the right play. And you know, that's the difference between winning and losing in a game like this.
BC, David and I have been talking a lot this week about putting guys in positions to succeed versus giving them opportunities to build trust over the long haul. For Jeff Sims specifically, right? If you want to put him in positions to succeed, for me, that means scaling back maybe some of the throws you ask him to make. But if you're trying to build trust for the long haul, you're going to have to, like you said, ask him to make some throws that maybe he didn't make against Minnesota. On that spectrum, where do you think the balance is?
Oh, man, that's tough.
I think ultimately, whatever your answer is, maybe it's just best case scenario. That's got to be kind of how Nebraska's thinking too, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, you early on, I think you do want to give him some throws. You feel like these are your best. How many ever throws? 3 to 4 throws that you have in your arsenal. Let's set it up on the table for you, and let's make these plays where you have it scripted out and you feel pretty good about it. I also think though, I thought they might actually try to stretch the field a little bit more earlier in that game. Now, the thing about the Minnesota game is it was disjointed, right? On offense, they only had 13 snaps going to like the 3-minute mark of the first half. So sometimes when you say that, like, oh, I thought they'd stretch the field earlier. Well, on which of the 13 plays did I expect that? They hardly had
to go. It was 21 plays to 9.
Yeah. So they hardly had the ball early on in the game, and I knew right away like that this would be a topic when Kemp. I don't know if he should have got it or not, but he let the ball roll and it goes to the 1-yard line. And then, okay, you're starting that drive there. So it was a very unfortunate beginning for the offense as far as just the situations involved. But I do think, back to your question, Robbie, about Jeff Sims in the passing game, I'd take a few shots deep and just show that you're going to do it. And also those are like, I think those are good for a QB because let's say it does get picked off. Well, hopefully it gets picked off 50 yards down the field and the guy gets tackled and stuff like that. So I think Tommy Hill could be a wild card in this game. You've heard him pop up a little bit. They thought he could run past Minnesota on the play he was out there, and he did. So you wonder if he'll get inserted in a little bit. They need to find somebody, whether it's a Jalen Lloyd or a Tommy Hill, though, that I think can occasionally do that, where the defense has to say, okay, that's part of what their operation is. If they don't have that, it makes it a lot more difficult.
BC, we kind of glossed over this, but I talked about it Monday or Tuesday. You feel like the clock and the rules sped Nebraska's staff up? Because over the course of watching the college football weekend, I felt like coaches really struggled to get adjusted to the tempo of the game.
Yeah, it might have. I do think it was startling to them just by the way they commented afterwards about how the first game or the first half really got away from the offense as far as having an opportunity. And this goes to that third down stat, though, too. Like the defense did play really well. But if I were to go to the other side of the coin, and this is what Tony White brought up the other night, too, because he gets it, is, with the clock rules as they are, third down, you gotta get off the field when you have them 3rd and 8, because against a team like Minnesota, that's going to take another at least 3 to 4 minutes off the clock. Against a team like Colorado, then they get like, okay, we convert the 3rd down. They get playing with tempo and they're playing how they want to do it. So those are moments where, yeah, if a team gets a 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 4 on you, that's football. There's a 50-50 shot on that. But if Nebraska gets Colorado into like 3 to 4 3rd and 8s or longer in the first half, you'd love to see Nebraska off the field on almost every one of those. And then I got away from your question a little bit, Damon, but I do think on the offensive side, I think it startled a lot of coaches across the country about how quickly things kind of move. Even if it at the end of the year, like, I don't know what the play differential was this year compared to last, if people averaged it out, but it did feel like you were losing snaps, certainly when you're in it.
Thank goodness for Greg Sharp being a pro, because even our commercial breaks, like, if he wasn't such a pro, we'd have been screwed. I'm sick, dude. Like, he's gosh, he's good at what he does. I mean, because he's helping him back in the studio with the engineers. Like, the breaks were, and he just kept his cool. He kind of managed the deal, and he called the game. I was like, Sharp, you're a monster.
It's gonna be fun. We're going to one of the biggest games in college football this week. Nebraska's in it. It's fun time.
You know it. Appreciate it, BC.
Thanks, BC.
Thanks, guys.
That's our friend Brian Chrisopherson, Husker 24/7.